just twitch a little bit, maybe it didn't hit 10 degrees, that's a half point. If the ailerons move at all, and you can see the move, that's a half point deduction. If you can see it move 10 degrees, that's a point. 2 points, 3 points, and just give it up. You screwed it up, it's 0. But that little flicker of the ailerons we talked about, where we adjust heading with the rudder and not the ailerons. And we had a contest, of course, here this weekend, IMAC contest, and I flew in it. Didn't fly my best, but flew okay. Unfortunately, there were 2 other guys that weren't in the last contest who flew a lot better than the guy that I was behind the last time. So he came in 3rd, I came in 4th. And some young kid from Las Vegas who flew really, really well. Nice flyer came in 1st. And another gentleman from California who's really improved a lot came in 2nd. So the competition was really, really good, and it was tough. But in the afternoon, the wind came up a little bit. And I found myself struggling sometimes with some of my maneuvers. There's one maneuver where we're out over here on this side of the box, and we go into a vertical down line. We do a 2 of 4, and then pull out and come back into the center and do a maneuver. I found myself over here, coming down the box, hitting my first point, kind of missing my second point. And what happened if I miss my second point and do the pull? Wrong way, right? A lot of deduction. So what I was trying to do, I would get to this point and show the judges, I'd stop at this point, stop at this point. I knew I didn't hit it, so when I started to pull, I'd feed in some rudder. By the time I got online, I was coming down the box again, right? So I corrected my heading, not by the aileron, but I corrected my heading by the rudder as I pulled out of the loop. And to the judges, I came out straight. And I went back and looked at my scores on that particular maneuver because I knew it muffed it a little bit. I was getting 8s on it. And that's a pretty good score. So I fooled the judge. I didn't fly it well, but by using the rudder versus the aileron, I was able to save a point. And that's part of the whole contest, is you got to fool the judge. And you do it by making those subtle corrections at a point where it's most difficult for the judges to see that. And I really learned that from other IMAC pilots who are flying the advanced classes. And you'll see Spencer do the same thing. He is not perfect all the time, but you'll almost always see him if you look at him. When he's way down at the end of the box on an upline or a downline, he's making that subtle adjustment. So when he comes back in, he's perfect. And if he knows he's off right here, he doesn't make a correction in front of the judge where they can see it. He makes a correction over here, maybe a correction over here. And when he's back in front of the box, in front of the judges, he looks perfect. He's a master at doing that. Just really, really smooth. Hammer. Hammer is a tough maneuver, and when you do it right, it looks really pretty. It's a hammer or a stall turn, whatever you want to call it. But basically, you pull to the vertical, come up to the point where ideally the airplane stops its vertical transition, it rotates, and comes right back down the same line. Now, reasonably, you're not really going to be able to do that. So what you're looking for, we're coming up to this point, and this really becomes our pivot point. If we can pivot on that wingtip and come back down, we've done a perfect hammer. That takes a lot of throttle management, rudder management, and sometimes a little adjustment with the ailerons, but mostly it's throttle. We get to this point where we're coming up, we're almost to a stop. We're really probably still about a quarter to a third throttle because we want the air from the prop flowing over those surfaces. So when we kick the rudder's effective. Sometimes you'll see people come up and stall with almost 0 throttle. You almost start to slide down and you come back into the rudder. At this point, it's really too late because you can crank up the prop, you can get the airflow going, but you've already muffed it. So the idea is to come up to the hammer with some throttle, kick the throttle while you've still got a lot of airflow coming across the rudder, let this thing pivot around there, and when you get up to a pivot point, get off the throttle, let gravity take over and let you take you right back down the line. And we'll demonstrate that with John about some ones that look good and some ones that look bad, and you can see the difference as to what the hammer varies. And in a competition, if you pivot around this point, that's a perfect score pretty much. And if your downline is good, your upline is good, you'll score very high. If you pivot around this point and miss it by half a wing, that's a point. If you miss it by a full wing, it's 2 points. Miss it by 3 wings, half wings, it's 4 points. And if you miss it by this far, it's called a flyover. It looks something like this, which is not hammer. And you'll see all these in comparison.
So you're taking power all the way up, power, and then you shut down.
I'm going full throttle, getting my altitude. I'm coming off the throttle to about a third, so my plane starts to not proceed up quite so quickly. I'm still at about a third to quarter throttle. When it gets up to the point where it's almost stopped, kick the rudder hard. So I got air coming across the rudder. And about this point, I'm off the throttle. So I've got the spin and the momentum, so I'm going to spin anyway. So now I'm off the throttle and the airplane will come on around, back down again.
So you went up and then you kicked it.
I actually kicked it because I'm at still at third throttle, and when I kick that rudder, it kind of slams it over.
Yeah, but I mean, you hit the throttle.
I stay at the same point. I'm full throttle. I idle back to about a quarter, maybe a third, and I stay there. And it's not going to continue to go vertical. So when I get up to a point where it's starting to stall, I'm still at about a third throttle. I kick the rudder at third throttle. It kicks my plane over. I'm off the rudder, and now it comes back down again.
Just got to make sure you're slow at that point.
Yeah.
The airplane cannot be, if you're climbing, let's say third throttle, and the airplane is still accelerating uphill, and you kick that, you're going to do a wing over. It's not going to work. The airplane has to come up, and this is what takes a bazillion hours of doing it. You go up, you look at the airplane, and just as it comes to a stop, you hit the rudder. Just as you stop. Right, just as the airplane stops flying.
Like John said, every plane is different. Every plane will stall differently. Every plane will probably need a different throttle setting to do that. Like my stick, it needs about 3/4 throttle because I got a really small rudder, and it's those big floppy wings, lots of drag there. On a pattern airplane or an IMAC airplane, not nearly as much throttle because it's much more aerodynamic.
I was just going to make, if you're in a crosswind, it's better to hammer into the wind.
Right.
Yeah.
And we could probably demonstrate that today with the
We're
wind.
gonna get
And that's another good point. The hammer is a stall. The hammer is a stall maneuver. So let's say I'm hammering and the wind's coming directly at me. I pull into the wind, I go up and hammer, and I'm stalled, and my airplane moves this direction. That's not a reduction. I'm in a stall. My plane is vertical. I'm basically in a no flying condition. I'm not subject to the wind. If I'm coming up this way, typically if that wind's coming in this direction, let's say the wind is coming directly here. So if I go into the vertical line, if I hold my vertical line, I'm going like that. I'm missing a heading. So if I go into the vertical line, I'm actually tilted into the wind a little bit. So my vertical track is what I'm looking at, not where the plane is pointed. And when I hammer, I'll typically come up this point because I got to get vertical. Now I'll hammer, and when I come back down the line, I got to point my plane back into the wind to come down. Otherwise, I'm going to drift this way. So if I hammered without correction, I look something like this. My vertical line is an angle. So if I hammer with correction, here's my vertical line, hammer, my vertical line. So I'm judging the vertical line, I'm not judging the point, the position of the airplane.
Judging the angle.
The vertical line doesn't have to be perpendicular to the ground. It can be set a little
right.
bit of degree.
The vertical line I'm flying is 90 degrees. Where my plane is pointing is not 90 degrees.
You judge the track of the airplane.
track on attitude. It'll get a wind like this, it gets out of sync.
And you'll see when John mentions it takes many repetitions to get a hammer down. And typically people continue to struggle with it in different conditions.
Say, let me grab me. One thing I think it needs to be mentioned, we talked a lot about the plane stalling there before the rotation. Don't let it tail slide. You let that plane, if the judges can see a tail slide before the rotation, you just got a zero on that maneuver. So you could have the perfect, up, down, and over, and it's a zero. So that's a tricky point up there. Everything that's been said is correct, but we don't want that plane to tail slide any perceptible amount.
Now there is a maneuver specifically called a tail slide. And that's what the guys in the unlimited class and the advanced class perform. And what the goal of that is, they have a tail slide to the canopy or the tail slide to the gear. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up, stall the airplane, let the airplane slide back down, and then flop it down either to the canopy or flop it down to the gear. And that one's very difficult because getting it to a hammer is difficult enough, but now holding that position so that it comes up and I slide back down this position, and then being able to either tilt it this way or this way and get it correct, especially if there's a wind, really, really tough. And you'll see the advanced guys or the unlimited guys struggle with that one, especially because it's a difficult maneuver. And then we always talk about linking them together. And the basic maneuver. Actually, why don't you somebody call out the basic maneuver for me? Just call out number 1, 2, and 3. Or John, maybe you want to do it.
Okay.
So I'm in the box.
In the box, first thing's one horizontal roll. We're going to do a Humpty with a half roll down. Come back into a half reverse Cuban, half roll. One inside.
Regular shark?
It's a shark tooth half roll on the down. 45 down. And what do we got? The hammerhead. Yeah, that's and a 360 turn. And blade down, Humpty.
And you'll notice all my maneuvers halfway down the line.
And an implement.
Here's our implement. Pull that half loop.
And turn and a half spin.
Into the garage.
And we'll talk about the spin probably next week. The spin's another really difficult one. And the aileron roll looks simple and looks really pretty when it's done well, but it's also a very difficult maneuver. So today, let's go ahead and fly.
Okay.
We'll fly the emblem, we'll fly the split S, we'll fly the hammer. And on this one, I might just mention the reason we're back here. One of the club members had mentioned that it was a bad idea to